On August 16th, thousands of tourists in Tibet were blocked for a few days from entering Yunnan at the border crossing. Nearly running out of food, the tourists had a fierce physical confrontation with the epidemic prevention officers at the border. Since a severe outbreak occurred in Tibet, most of the routes back to the mainland from Tibet have been blocked to contain the spread. The border crossing between Yunnan and Tibet is the only way to enter Yunnan. Previously, it was found that tourists returning from Tibet had tested positive for nucleic acid. As a result, the border crossing in Yunnan immediately began to impose strict controls on the vehicles and tourists passing through. A video posted by netizens shows that thousands of tourists returning from Tibet are blocked at the checkpoint. Some of them have been on the road for 3 days and are running out of food. They are anxious to get out of the checkpoint. Yet, fearing the outbreak spread, the authorities in Yunnan province have simply suspended the release of people and vehicles. As a result, the tourists began to argue and clash with the epidemic prevention officers. Some tourists were pinned to the ground by epidemic prevention staff. A similar situation occurred at the border crossing of Sichuan in Tibet. The border county in Sichuan blocked the provincial border and prevented tourists from Tibet from entering. Tourists tried to rush through the gate and were stopped. Epidemic prevention personnel formed a human wall to prevent anyone from passing. Hainan province openly confronts other provinces and cities. Reasons for being stranded leave tourists cold. As of August 15th, there are still more than 100,000 tourists stranded in Hainan due to the sudden outbreak of COVID-19. Unable to appease the tourists who have kept protesting, the authorities have decided to confront various governments across the country, shifting the tension to the tourists' hometowns. Upon knowing the truth of why they are stranded, some tourists feel devastated and disheartened. Since August 6th, when Hainan locked down the city, stranded tourists have been protesting against the Hainan government at hotels and airports, demanding to go home. It's said that 150,000 tourists were initially stranded, and as of August 15th, there are still more than 100,000 people stuck. The Hainan government, unable to withstand the tremendous pressure, deliberately made public an official document that reveals talks with various local governments, exposing that the actual reason for the tourists being stranded was because the local governments in the tourists' hometowns refused to receive them, rather than Hainan denying them passage. A letter titled, "On the Emergency Coordination of the Release of Flights" has been circulating online. It shows that the poor coordination among various localities in receiving tourists from Hainan has forced the Hainan provincial government to send an urgent letter on August 14th to the Jiangsu provincial government to ask for help, requesting the receipt of stranded passengers. Otherwise, it threatens to report to the State Council. Despite the central order from the State Council for local jurisdictions to receive the stranded tourists, there has been resistance in the process. In addition, a netizen disclosed some internal news that most provinces and cities across the country are now refusing to accept flights from Hainan, while metropolitan cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are strictly limiting the number of flights from Hainan. According to media reports, Vice Premier Sun Chuen-lan, who is in charge of the epidemic prevention, rushed to Hainan on August 13th, demanding to accelerate the return of tourists and that the relevant provinces and cities must not refuse or restrict their acceptance. Some analysts point out that the massive protests by stranded tourists have pushed Hainan to the forefront of public attention, and Hainan officials who fear taking the blame have gone out of their way to disclose to the public that the main reason for the tourists being stranded is due to various governments. Now the tourists who are stranded in Hainan have come to understand that it's not Hainan that wants to keep them, but their hometowns that refuse to accept them. Some of the travelers feel disappointed, frustrated, and disheartened that their hometowns don't want them and Hainan isn't welcoming either. On August 14th, stranded tourists in Sanya, Hainan held a massive protest, yelling, "We want to go home." Tourists even took to the streets to protest. A man was stranded in a B&B in Sanya, Hainan. On August 13th, the landlord pulled the plug and cut off power when he didn't have the money to renew his room. This is after he had spent 20,000 RMB on the room. COVID-19 continues to spread in multiple locations in China. On August 15th, there were 2,368 new local cases involving 19 provinces and regions. Among them, Hainan has 1,211 cases, accounting for more than 50%. For a few days in a row, Hainan has added more than 1,000 new cases every day. On August 15th, officials declared a state of war to fight the outbreak and launched an extensive door-knocking operation to ensure that all cases were examined and no one was missed.